Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you all for joining our live webinar today. So we'll give about 10 to 5 minutes to allow other people join us, and then we'll start the live webinar. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you so much for joining. We'll just give about 3 minutes to allow more people join us on the call. Start the session in a minute. Just give room 1 more minute to have more people join.
We can start.
Yes, thank you all for your patience. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you so much for taking our time to join our live webinar today. My name is Peace Lotichiko, and I'm an associate and team lead with the Immigration and Labor and Employment Practice Group at Bloomfield Law Practice. And it's my sincere pleasure to be hosting and moderating this live webinar today. In a few minutes, please permit us to introduce our practice area and what we do. We provide assistance and offer consular advice on inbound and outbound businesses and work authorizations. And generally, we advise on with respect to obtaining work permits, regulatory work visas, entry clearance visas, expatriate quota approvals, business permits, and as well processing applications such as the Nigerian citizenship and naturalization. We also provide document procurement services, verification of documents, authentication and legalizations of documents. And based on our scope of work, we have a wide range of experience working with the embassies and consular officers. And it's a pleasure to be moderating this live webinar today. And we sincerely appreciate everyone that has taken our time to join our webinar today. Our webinar today will be addressing the topic visa refusal phobia. And due to the wave of visa refusals generally across the globe and in Nigeria, experienced by various applicants, it has now become pertinent that we address this topic and basically understand possible reasons for visa refusals and possible solutions. I bet you all agree with me that visa refusals are very tough and it's not a good experience, basically. So today on our live webinar, we will be addressing several areas such as challenges, several experiences, and possible solutions. I would also like to thank everyone who has just joined today. My name is Peace Lotechiko, and I will be moderating the live webinar today. Please, at this point, permit me to introduce our key speaker, Mr. Adikunle Obebe, who is a partner and head of the Immigration Practice Group at Bloomfield Law Practice. You're welcome, sir. Thank you for taking our time to join us today.
Thank you for having me.
Yes. Mr. Obebe is a global mobility specialist and an immigration expert. He's also our managing partner at Bloomfield Law Practice, and he's the chair of the Immigration Practice Group. He'll be answering all our live questions today. Please, if you have any questions at any point in this live webinar, kindly put your questions in the question and answer chat box. There's a section for question and answers. Please feel free to put your questions and we would address it on this live webinar, basically. Please save your questions and it will be addressed as we progress with this webinar. So it's a pleasure once again to have you on board our first visa refusal series. We're going to have more series on, visa refusals and, the likes. And it's our first webinar and we're grateful to have you all on board. So at this point, we would be discussing the challenges that applicants face during visa refusals, and our speaker would be addressing certain challenges that, due to our experiences, we've noticed that applicants face once they have a visa refusal. Please let me remind you that the chat box, there's a section for the question and answer section, and if you have any questions, please save them there, and we would address them before we, as we progress with this live webinar. Thank you. So in the next few minutes, we'll be speaking on challenges that applicants face with visa refusals. Thank you. So Mr. Obebe, we'll have you now.
Yes. First of all, thank you everyone for joining the call. It's quite an interesting topic when we were thinking about it, based on the fact that the number of visa refusals that we have seen in the past 2 to 3 years now, that in itself is the reason why we've decided to have this webinar. We've seen that a lot of legitimate visa applications have been refused. And when we look at those applications, a lot of times there are errors, there are things that could have been done that could have forestalled the refusals. So ordinarily, the challenges that come with the visa refusal, the first thing is disrupted travel plans. You can imagine, I always like to use this example. You're traveling with your children and you've told your children that you're traveling on a set date. And by the time you apply for the visas are refused. You can imagine the amount of disappointment that the children will have. Or you have a meeting, a business meeting you need to attend, and maybe it's a new client that you just signed up, and they want to have a physical meeting, and they've sent all the documents that is required for the visa to you, but you apply and the visa is refused. That also definitely would affect the business. And flowing from that is also the financial loss that comes with that. So you can look at both the direct financial loss, which has to do with things like the cost for applying the visa, which basically is minimal, but things like for some embassies, you need to travel to another state to apply for the visa, or you even need to travel to another country to apply for the visa. So the financial loss cannot be quantified. Particularly for somebody that's going for business, for instance, if you have to close a business deal and you are unable to make the travel, you can imagine the cost that would have as well. Then I think thirdly, looking at the stigma and the effect, the emotional effect as well. When your visa is refused, I know it has like an emotional effect on quite a number of people. And as a result of that, it starts to affect things like their self-esteem. So there are lots of challenges that come with the visa denial, and that's the reason why we felt that it's good for us to have this conversation. Thank you. Yeah, please.
Thank you very much for the interesting inputs on challenges. And we understand that visa refusals can, lead to disrupted travel plans, stress and anxiety. It's really tough. There's stigma, there's reputation impact, there's financial loss, your plans are disrupted, you're probably facing the dilemma at that point and you're in a very tough period. So flowing from the conversations that we've had now and having understood the challenges of the visa refusals, we will then delve proper into our live questions and answers. So I'll be asking you certain questions and you'll be providing us basically the answers and possible solutions probably at the end of the live section. Just to also remind everyone that the question and answer section is open. Feel free to save your questions. If you have any questions as we progress with the webinar, please put in your questions and we will be addressing them right after the live question and answer section. So flowing from our conversations on the challenges of visa refusal, our first question will then be, what are the common reasons for visa denials and how can applicants avoid them?
Thank you for that question. I think the first thing we even have to understand is there are two major visa categories. There's the non-immigrant visa category and there's the immigrant visa category. So the non-immigrant visa category has to do with individuals that are going for a short period. Maybe they are going to school, maybe they are going on holidays. They don't intend to permanently reside in the country they are visiting. So what will be issued to them is a non-immigrant visa, or maybe you are going for business, for instance. Then the second major category is the immigrant visa, which has to do with individuals that are permanently relocating to that country. So those are the two major types of visas. However, for some countries, they now have sub-visas under that, sub-visa categories under that. Now, I think the first one I would like to talk about is with regards to the incomplete application or false information. So when I say incomplete application, when the applicant fails to provide sufficient information for the consular officer to make a decision, in such cases, what you will see is that the visa will be refused. If the consular officer does not have sufficient information to make to grant the visa, then the second one, of course, will be false information, where you have the applicant providing false information. Ordinarily, what would happen is if the consular officer is able to detect that information that is provided is false, then the visa will not be granted. In some cases, it may even lead to for some countries, it may even lead to a visa ban. Some countries may ban for a year, for 2 years, and 5 years. So in both cases, it's about the information that you provide. First of all, is the information that you are providing enough for you to get the visa? And the second thing is, if you try to provide information that is not correct or that is false, then the visa will not be issued. I think the second one that we also see that is that happens quite regularly is the information that is provided. There's an error in the application, and that usually happens because what we have seen is there's been a proliferation of a lot of visa agents. So these individuals act as agents to obtain visas for people. What they do is that they help you compile the documentation. They help you fill the form, and once the form is submitted, in a lot of cases, we find out that even the applicant does not know all the information that is filled in there, or maybe the information that is filled in there is not correct. Then in such a situation, then the visa will not be issued. Also, it's also important that a lot of visa agents tend to add documents or create documents in order to try and see how they can assist the applicants to get the visa. We always advise clients, because we've had clients in the past that have mentioned this to us. We always advise clients that it's better you just submit correct documents instead of trying to add or forge documents and submit it, because the consular officer is able to spot those kind of documents that may be submitted. The third one that usually happens regularly is on two legs: irregular funds and the lack of financial capacity. So with regards to irregular funds, what we've seen is some applicants would maybe they do not have enough income to be able to support their visa application. So they would ask for maybe a third party to transfer funds to their account to be able to submit the visa application. Now, the reason why they ask for the statement of account for at least 6 months is for the consular officer to go through the statement of account and be able to see where the income of that individual is coming from, and also be able to determine whether they have sufficient income to be able to travel and return back to their country. Now, if they spot a certain income that or a certain payment that was made into the account that does not tally with the usual payments that are made into the account, then that automatically is a red flag, and because of that, they would refuse the visa. Then the other part is lack of financial capacity to be able to apply for the visa. That's another issue that arises regularly, because what usually happens is that the consular officer will convert the income the individual makes in Nigeria to their country's, they'll do the exchange rate, and they'll find out whether they're actually able to do that. Now that the Naira is about 1,000 to a US dollar, for instance, what the consular officer will do will be to do the calculation. And once they do the calculation and they see that the individual is not able to afford the travel, then automatically the visa will be issued. You would also notice that they would mention that they don't want that applicant to get to their country and have to refer to public funds, because ordinarily, once you arrive in their country, there are some obligations that are on them as well, maybe with regards to health or with regards to where you are going to stay. So it's important that one takes that into account as well. Then another one is the unclear visa category. So the individual, the applicant, must be able to know what they are going to do there. If you are going for business, for some countries, they have the business visa and they have the tourist visa. Now, if you are going for business and you apply for a tourist visa, then the chances are that you may not get that visa, or you are going for holidays and you apply for a business visa. So a lot of times that is also an issue because some individuals may not really understand the visa process for some countries. Then the fifth one is the criminal record. If an applicant has a criminal record, that would also be a red flag, particularly when it comes to immigrant visas, because for immigrant visas, they would ask for some form of police check. In Nigeria, they call it the police clearance, to be able to confirm whether the individual has any criminal record. And if there's a criminal record, some countries automatically will not issue the visa. So generally, those are a few of the examples of why we see a lot of visa refusals. There are quite a number of them. Some embassies may not even give you a reason for the refusal, but these are the main ones that we see regularly. Thank you.
Thank you very much for your profound answers. For those who are just joining, I would do a bit of a recap on how far we've gone in the webinar. So we have discussed on the challenges that applicants face when they have a visa refusal, such as disrupted travel plans, financial loss, stress, and then the anxiety that comes during that period, and how tough it is to deal with the visa refusal. The stigma, you have reputation, general financial loss, and we have also addressed possible reasons for visa denials. And from the earlier conversations, we understand that the consular officers and the visa issuing officers are very thorough people. They verify every information that's provided. So common reasons are incomplete, false information, when you have errors, typical errors in your application form, and irregular fundings, because the consular officer goes through everything you provide, including your financial statements. And if they notice any form of an irregular funds or transfer, or if they notice a lack of financial capacity, that's a very, very recurring ground for refusal. Then you have the unclear visa category, which our speaker has explained that there's the non-immigrant visa category and then the immigrant visa category. So it's very crucial that every applicant understands their reason for travel. So if you're traveling for a business purpose, if you're traveling for visiting or for tourism or, residency, it's very pertinent that you understand the reason for your trip. And if you do that, you're able to understand what visa category you are applying for. So once your application does not exactly tell the consular officer or the issuing officer the exact visa category, creates a confusion, and that's another reason for a visa denial. Then the applicant's criminal record, the officers review every applicant's record in Nigeria, like a criminal record. So if they notice there's any issue whatsoever or if they notice any dent in anybody's identity, then it's also a red flag to an application. Then there's inadequate information about your travel plans. If you're unable to convince or state to the issuing officer the reasons for your trip, and they are unclear as to why you need to travel for that particular period, then that's also a ground for a refusal. Then also lack of general expert advice. So it's advisable that prior to our submissions, we ensure that we provide the right information, especially because the officers are very thorough people and they review every information you provide. You provide them with adequate documentations. You ensure that you're applying for the right category of visa, which is why it is important that you do a bit of a research or seek an expert guidance, understand the different categories of visas that are available to you and for your purpose of trip, and then ensure that you provide adequate documentations to back up that trip. So now we'll be moving to our next question, and a question for our speaker. The second question that we have is the steps that an individual can take to prepare a strong visa application to minimize the risks of denial. As we have earlier been informed that it is very, very important that you provide your visa application form the correct information. So now we would be looking at steps that we can take as applicants to ensure that we prepare a strong visa application just to minimize, the risks of a denial. So we'll have Mr. Obebe now address our question. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Peace. I think the first thing that usually happens that one has to consider is the fact that when a refusal has happened, it's important that before you submit the next visa application, that individual will seek legal advice. It's not something that usually happens in our terrain, but it's something that we're starting to encourage, particularly if the visa has been refused. For first-time applicants, it's important that you understand that ensuring that all the documentation is complete when the forms are filled, ensuring that all the information in there is correct. I always advise clients that once you fill an application form and before you submit it, try and print it out and go through it. A lot of times the applications are done online, but you may skip information if you are reading the information online. It's better you print it out and go through that information before you click send, because once you click send, that means that the information that you have provided, and you will see that there's always at the bottom of, before you submit the visa application, there's always a caution sign there that, are you sure that this information that you're providing is the correct information? And once you click send, then that means that the information that they have with them is now in their record. So any error in there would definitely affect the visa application in the future. What I would also advise for individuals that have been refused in the past to seek legal advice. When I say legal advice, it's just to guide you through the process of applying the second time, particularly if you're applying to the same country. It's important to note that they already have your information from your past application, and you must ensure that the information that they have tallies with the information you are providing in the second application. If there is need for clarification, that can be done in the second application. If, for instance, there was a minor issue that was raised that needs to be addressed in the second application, you can actually submit a letter to respond to that refusal notice. And with that letter, you can make any clarifications you need to make. And based on that, we have seen that a lot of visas are actually issued after that. So in a sense, I think the critical thing is before you submit, make sure that the information is correct. Make sure you have all the documentation in place. Make sure, particularly some embassies will state the documents that they need for the a visa application category. So you make sure you have all those documents, and once you submit that application, then the visa most probably will be issued. But I have to make a note of caution as well. What usually happens is that when legal advice is provided, what it does is that it increases the probability of having the visa issued, because it's still up to the consular officer to determine the veracity of the application. So in a sense, it's still up to the embassy. We cannot give 100% assurance, but the chances are improved because you would have someone that has experience in advising on immigration law, reviewing the application. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I completely agree with, your points raised on while addressing our question, what steps can an individual take to prepare a strong visa application? And I totally agree that we advise applicants to seek legal advice or an expert advice before you submit an application. Reason being that from my experience, we noticed that quite a number of applicants sometimes do not understand certain questions, sometimes do not understand the visa application or visa process, and it would really, really help your application if you seek expert advice prior to submission and basically ensure that all the information you've provided, like our speaker rightly said, once you click submit, while completing an application or submitting a visa application, it's gone. There is no unable to, edit any errors you notice or correct any issues you notice after you have submitted, basically. So you have the time prior to submission to ensure that all the information that you have provided is accurate. So prior to any submission you do, if there are certain things that you need clarity on, it's best that you see session. I have noticed that a number of people have dropped their question, and I also like to remind everyone that the question and answer chat box is open for every one of us. If you have any questions that you would like us to address once we have completed the live question and answer section, please drop them in and we'll address them as we progress with the webinar. Thank you very much. So our next question, flowing from our conversations, would be if there are specific strategies that we as applicants, can use to address, visa denials during application. So if an applicant has been denied a visa in the past, what can we do? What are the strategies that we can take to address this denial issue, maybe raised by the previous application while submitting a new application? Thank you.
Thank you for that question. So it depends on the embassy. So there are two things. It's either they have an appeal process or they don't have an appeal process. Now, for those that have an appeal process, what that means is that once you apply for the visa and the visa is refused, the regulations allow you to appeal that decision, and that appeal is considered by a higher authority to the consular officer. So in some cases, some embassies have that. And once an embassy has that, what that means, therefore, is that you are allowed to submit further documents to show that the visa refusal was wrong. And in some cases, the visa will now be issued after consideration of the appeal. Now, the appeal process for some countries, for some embassies may take a while. So it's always important that you take into context the reason for your travel. If it's for a conference, for instance, and the conference date has passed and you decide to appeal, the appeal may not succeed because the date of your travel has passed. Now, for the second one, if the country does not have an appeal process, then what that means automatically is that you need to reapply. Now, in resubmitting the application, what I usually advise is that it's important that you address the issues that were raised in the refusal notice. For some countries, they issue the refusal notice. For some countries, they don't issue a refusal notice. For those that issue the refusal notice, the grounds for refusal will be stated in the refusal notice. And it's good for you to respond to those issues that were raised. And if it means that you have to provide additional information or additional documentation in support of the application, those documents are provided. Once that is done, what we see is that the chances that the visa will be issued on the second application is quite high because you've responded to the issues that were raised in the application. So for the appeal, we would advise that you have legal advice, have someone that has an understanding of the regulations or is able to interpret the country's regulations, the immigration regulations, and based on that, they are able to appeal the decision. For the second case, if the application is made the second time and the visa is refused, then I've seen cases where that the second refusal notice is responded to in the third visa application, particularly if the individual knows that they have a reason, they have a cogent reason to travel. So I've seen individuals that have gotten their visa on the second try and even on the third try. But at the end of the day, you must address those issues that are raised. Some people would apply for the visa. And once they are refused, they will not respond to the refusal notice and submit another application. And what the consular officer will do will be to definitely they will say that their all applications are considered on its merit. However, they would still consider the fact that you haven't responded to that first refusal notice, and those issues, they will say those issues haven't been addressed. So that's the strategy we usually use when a visa is refused. Yeah.
Thank you very much, Mr. Baby. For the benefit of those who are just joining the webinar, I would do a quick recap on how far we've gone. So we have Mr. Obebe, who is the partner and chair of the Immigration and Labor and Employment Practice Group of Bloomfield Law Practice, and he has graciously answered a couple of our questions that have been raised, during this live webinar. I would basically explain a few or give a recap of, his responses and then the questions that
Sorry,
we've asked.
please, I'm
Yes, please.
thinking of the time that we have. Would it be possible to have the recap at the end so everyone would be able to enjoy the recap? Because if individuals still join now, yeah,
Okay,
so we can
that's
have the
a very
recap
good
at
point.
the end. Yeah,
Okay,
so
that's fine.
maybe go ahead
That's
with the questions then.
okay. Okay, that's fine. So our next question would then be have there been any success stories or examples of individuals who, based on your experience, have faced visa denials, but overcame it, and maybe after a reapplication, like you said, or after an appeal, had then been granted the visa in, the next trial that the applicant, did. So it would need success stories or examples, if any, based on your experience of, applicants who have faced visa denials in the past, what happened after the reapplication or an appeal. Thank you.
Okay, thank you for the question. When I saw the question, I actually smiled because the first one I'd like to talk about was a friend of mine that was refused a visa because there were, so in the refusal notice, it was one of the reasons was that he had inconsistencies in his income. And the second one was that he did not show enough family ties. So we prepared a letter which he signed. And in the letter, we explained the inconsistencies, and we also showed provided additional documents to support the inconsistencies. And a letter was also obtained from his office as well. So ordinarily that resolved that. Then with regards to the family ties, we provided additional documents to show that he was married and his wife and his children are residing in Nigeria. So that is enough strong family tie to show that you are not going to reside in the country. And the funny thing was that the embassy called him to come and pick up his passport. That that was really surprising for me because ordinarily you would have expected that it goes through like the VFS or the agent that handles the visa submission. So that was a good success story for us. I think the second one will be quite interesting because the second one is myself. Early this year, I was refused a visa, and when I saw the refusal notice, I just laughed out loud because it was quite interesting for me because I looked at all the grounds that they raised, and it was a joy for me to respond to them. It was a joy for me to respond to them. So I wrote a lengthy appeal and I sent it to them, and they sent back. They asked for me to send my passport so I could get the visa. So the issue there is that there's no one that is not prone to visa refusal, but the question there is, what do you do after that? And that's the reason why we are having this conversation today. There are a lot of legitimate applications, visa applications that are actually refused. And that's the reason why we felt this would be a good time to have this conversation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So we've listened to experiences, even a personal experience from the speaker where he was refused a visa earlier this year and he appealed and his visa was granted, afterwards, which then, explains the strategies that he had earlier listed, which also includes a reapplication. And for embassies and countries who allow the appeal, you can we can appeal the decision and then the embassy would consider your appeal, and if they are convinced, they grant the visa basically. So our next question then will be, are there any notable trends or changes in immigration policies or processes that may impact the likelihood of visa denials for certain applicants? Just before you answer that question, I've noticed that we have a lot of questions, quite a number of questions in the question and answer section. But if you have any other questions, please continue to save your questions, and we would have a time in within the live webinar to take your questions shortly, very soon. We're almost done with the live question and answer section. Thank you. So we'll have Mr. Obibi address our question. I'll go over it again. Are there any notable trends or changes in immigration policies or processes which you think may impact the likelihood of visa denial for certain applicants, apart from the earlier cases which you have listed?
Okay, so thank you for the question. I think what we've seen is there's been an upsurge in the number of visa applications, and the reason that has been is because of the socioeconomic issues that we are currently going through or experiencing in Nigeria. And that has led to a surge in applications. And usually what that means, therefore, is that the embassies have more visa applications to consider and they have shorter time to consider each application. So what that means, therefore, is that some applications that are legitimate applications will actually slip through the cracks, and the visa will be refused for those kind of applications. So that's the reason why we are seeing quite a number of visa refusals at this time. I also think that there's also been a proliferation of visa agents. And I must say that some of them know what they are doing, but a lot of them don't actually know what they are doing. So when they assist applicants to submit visa applications, a lot of times the applicants may not even have a knowledge of what is in the application. So if they go in for a physical interview and they are asking them questions about their application, they will not be able to answer those questions because they don't know what is in the visa application. And what that means, therefore, is that the consular officer will automatically refuse the visa if you don't know what you are traveling for. So I'm not saying that some of them don't know what they are doing, but a lot of them don't. And because of that, there's also been a lot of visa refusals because of this proliferation of visa agents. So I would advise that if you are seeking advice, seek proper legal advice from a lawyer that knows about the immigration process, and they would now be able to guide you through the process and also avoid the issue of a history of visa refusals. I also always advise clients that because for every visa application you submit, there's always the question that have you been refused in the past? And a lot of individuals would, because they don't want to distort the current visa application, may say no, but that information is out there, and if you provide false information, then in a sense the visa will not be issued. So that is what I've seen with regards to strategies. Thank you. Peace.
Thank you very much. And interestingly, we have, seen a number of visa denials, specifically for social economic conditions. So, I mean, in Nigeria now, a lot of countries are taking advantage or then using social economic conditions such as the surge, of Nigerians leaving, to further their academics, and so due to certain reasons that are stated in the visa denial, such as, the economic condition in Nigeria. So these are now grounds. But however, like we have earlier advised, that it's very, very pertinent that you ensure that while completing your application form and your visa application, ensure that you include the right information, ensure that there are no mistakes on your part, ensure that you have a strong application submitted to the embassy with, strong supporting documents. And if there are any issues raised, probably salient issues that can be addressed with an appeal or a reapplication. So then we'll go to our last question, possibly, which then would be could you please provide us insights into the role of consular officers or immigration officials in the visa application process? So what do they typically do? What does a consular officer do? What does a visa issuing officer do? What does an immigration official do in a visa application process? And how their decisions may impact an applicant's application?
Thank you for the question. I think the first thing to consider is that when we look at visa applications, we always try to look at it from the eye of the consular officer. I always jokingly say that every consular officer believes you are not coming back to Nigeria. You are the one that needs to prove to them. The onus is on you to prove to them that you intend to come back to Nigeria. That means that you have to show them enough evidence to be able to support that you are coming back to Nigeria. So in a sense, what that means therefore is that you must be able to provide sufficient information. I have, in a bid to provide sufficient information, I have seen individuals provide more information than is necessary. I've seen someone had a photo album, and they brought, I think it was their marriage photo album to the embassy. Like, that is not ordinarily required. Things like if you can provide your marriage certificate and your children's birth certificates for minors, then that is enough to show that you have strong ties in the country. So it's not about the number of documents that you provide, because a lot of people try to put in so much information and so much documentation, and a lot of times that would actually not help the application, because the consular officer has a certain number of maybe minutes or hours that they're supposed to use for each application. You can imagine if somebody was treating maybe 20 applications in the past per day, now they have to treat over 150 or 200 applications per day. The mindset will change. They would want to get through as many applications as possible. They will not have time to really scrutinize each application to consider whether the person is a valid traveler or not. So I always advise people, provide the information, provide the documentation that will show, sufficient documentation that will show that this is the reason for travel, and on that basis, the visa will be issued. With regards to those that have gainful employment, it's important that you show evidence of your employment. A lot of embassies will have things like your letter of employment and a letter from your company. If the company is the one sponsoring the travel, for instance, they have to have a letter to show that they are the ones sponsoring. You would also need to show evidence that the company has the capacity to sponsor. So you would need a copy of their not a copy now, the original bank statement for the company. And they would also ask for your bank statement as well, to be able to see that you have sufficient income to be able to spend while you are there as well. I must also reiterate the issue of fake documents as well, because what we've seen is a lot of visa agents tend to prepare fake documents and they submit it on behalf of visa applicants. But the problem there is that they submit the same type of documents, the same type of fake documents to the embassy. And once the embassy sees those documents, they know that this is where the document is coming from. So automatically the person gets a visa refusal and possibly a visa ban. So I'm not scaring us not to use visa agents, but I'm just advising us that you need to be careful and know that the visa agents that you are about to use knows what they are doing. And also you have a right to go through the application before they submit it on your behalf, because any information they put in there on your behalf would automatically mean that you are the one that is responsible for that information. For embassies that allow for document-only application, it's important that as much as possible, you ensure that the original documents are obtained. And you are also able to track those original documents as well. There are cases where original documents are submitted to the embassy and the documents are not returned. So you have evidence that these are the documents that you submitted to the embassy, and based on that, you are able to track that as well. So I think generally those are the points that have to do with how the consular officer, how they think. And just for those that are attending, because this is the first one, I would like to give you a sneak peek into our new, the next set of series that webinars that we'll be having. The plan is to actually invite consular officers to ask them, why have you refusing Nigerians visas? So we would speak to some consular officers from some countries and have webinars with them where we would ask them questions. And what are the things that you are looking out for to help visa applicants? So that's be on the lookout for our future webinars. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I agree with you. There has been a surge in the visa applications to, embassies. You have, if you go to a TLS now where you submit the UK visa applications, or a VFS, every morning just drive through or actually go there to submit your application. You see hundreds of people on the queue who are also waiting to submit applications the same way you are submitting it. And you don't have 100 consular officers or a lot of people who actually look into or review these applications. So we can help them by ensuring that we provide them with enough information, also truthful information, because embassies, they have, the right to review your documents, confirm the authenticity of your documents, even with agencies in Nigeria as well. So if you provide any false information, best believe me, they will find out. So it's very, very important that you as an applicant, even where you have third-party assistance, like we have earlier stated, if you have agents help, put together your application or even prepare your application forms, please go back and ensure that you review it and confirm that every information that is provided in that your application form or the documents that you submitted is true, is authentic, is valid, and verifiable. If there are any slight issues, trust me, there might possibly be a visa denial. And I mean, you won't blame the consular officers because they have so many applications that they have to, address. So we have, spoken about quite a lot on the webinar. We have discussed, challenges. We've also gone through, common reasons why visa applications are denied, which we've also emphasized the incomplete information, false, unverifiable financial statements, failure to provide adequate documentations, and so on and so forth. There's so many reasons, so many inconsistent, funds in your account, and so many possible reasons, really. So what then happens when you experience a visa denial? You have the option to appeal, you have the option, to do a reapplication, and we've also discussed, strategies and how to go about an appeal and a reapplication by addressing, the issues that were raised in the previous, visa denial, and ensuring that those issues are addressed before you do a reapplication, basically. And we have also noticed that there's so many reasons or factors now that the consular officers consider, even, even our social economic, conditions in Nigeria. So they look for every reason. So it's also good that we ensure that our applications are strong enough, and strengthened before we submit these applications to the embassies for their attention, basically. It will help them, ensure that our applications are issued and we get our visas, and avoid visa denials, basically. So now we will then basically discuss before we go before we take your questions, we would give room now while we discuss possible next steps, way forward solutions, when you have a visa denial. Before we go into that, we would advise that if you have your questions, if you haven't dropped your question in the question and answer section, please do so now, because after the next session, we'll be addressing our live questions. So if you have questions, please drop them in the question and answer chat box section, and we'll be addressing them shortly. So we'll then discuss what the way forward is, and we all agree with me now that we have heard a couple of them from our speaker, such as one, the appeal. Applicants can appeal or have the option to appeal, but it's also important to note that there are certain countries that do not allow for an appeal, then there are certain countries that allow, for an appeal. So once you are denied, once an applicant is denied a visa, you are issued with a denial notice or a denial slip. The first step for an applicant once you have a visa denial is, don't fret, but look through and review the visa denial notice and look out for the points that were raised. The consular officer would always state in the visa denial notice the reasons for the denial, basically, if they have reviewed your application and discovered that there is a false information provided, there is insufficient documentations, or they need you to provide something, everything will be stated. There's always a reason in the visa denial notice. And then afterwards, underneath the denial notice, you have the embassy tell you whether you have an option to appeal the decision or you should reapply. So the first thing to do once there is a visa denial is to review the visa denial notice to understand the reason for the denial. And because these reasons would be addressed when you are submitting a reapplication, you're submitting a new application, right? Then you also have to look out for if the embassy that you're going to or the country in which you're going to allows for an appeal, it will be stated. So the embassy either tells you this decision can be appealed or not, right? And if the decision can be appealed, please do not proceed to do a reapplication. Just prepare your appeal by providing an appeal letter, and documentation. You can always reach out to us. I would tell you our, inquiry email and our official email address if you have any further questions after this live webinar. Or, if you encounter any issues going forward, please feel free to reach out to us and we'll be happy to assist. And then if you have the ground to appeal, if you're allowed to appeal, please proceed with your appeal. By preparing an application, an appeal letter, and then submitting, supporting documents to strengthen your appeal application. And that is submitted again to the embassy. And for most appeal, I stand to be corrected, but for most appeal cases, you do not have to pay the application fee again. You just do an appeal, and once the decision is issued, you'll be sent a notification whether the visa appeal is considered, and your passport, and then tell you what the next steps will possibly be. Then, if the country or the embassy does not allow for an appeal, then you have an option to reapply. You can always reapply, to the embassy. Once you don't have a visa ban or anything, you can always reapply to the embassy. And whilst reapplying to the embassy, it is very important that you review the previous reasons for denial and ensure that in your reapplication, you have addressed these reasons. You can also go as far as providing a letter of explanation, explaining the previous reasons for denial, and then also stating the steps that you have taken to address that reason. It's very important because it helps the consular officer understand that there has been a previous visa refusal and you have addressed what the issues are. Every embassy has a record of the applicants. You have the previous record. If you've been issued a US visa, for example, even if you were issued your VEST visa in 2005, 2006, the embassy would always have your record. They would see if there was a denial, if there was a refusal, or if it was granted, see the grounds for the decision as at that time before approving your new application. So your record is always with the embassy, which is why it's important that while you are considering or proceeding with a reapplication, you address every previous issue that was raised in the old application just to avoid a future denial, basically. So I'd have Mr. Obebe, explain or highlight, other way forward that we as an applicant can consider when we have a visa denial.
Yeah, so thank you for that. I think also with the appeal as well, I think it's better to seek legal advice when it comes to the appeal, because there are some technicalities that come in those appeals. And it's important that you also have somebody that's able to interpret the regulations. If, for instance, the visa was refused based on some immigration regulations of that country, it's important that you have someone that understands the process to be able to file the appeal. The third one is to seek legal advice, which flows from the appeal. It's always important after you have been refused the visa to seek legal advice before you submit another application. I always tell people that it's even better that before you submit that first application, you can seek legal advice at that point to be able to ensure that whatever you are submitting, it meets the standard that the consular officer is looking for. Then the fourth one would definitely be to also look for another visa category that you want to apply for. That you may be able to meet that standard. So for some visa applications, there may be a standard that you are not able to meet. But if you now review the various visa categories and you now see that, oh, this particular visa category, I meet that standard, then you can apply for that visa category. Or also ensuring that you are applying for the correct visa category as well. If you are going for business, you don't go and apply for a tourist visa. Or if you are going for medical reasons, you don't go and apply for a tourist visa. There's a particular embassy. You notice that we've not mentioned any country or any embassy, and that's intentional because what we're trying to do is to ensure that we try to cover the field. But by the time we now have consular officers from the various countries, they can defend themselves and say, this is the reason why we have not been granting this visa, or this is the reason why a lot of refusals come from this visa category. So in a sense, that's the reason why we've tried to not mention any particular country or any embassy, and just generally provide general advice with regards to the various visa categories. So I think if those four things are done, then the number of visa refusals would for legitimate, I must reiterate, for legitimate visa applicants, for legitimate visa applicants. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Please, because of the time,
yes, we're
thinking
taking
if we can run through the questions now. Yes,
we're taking the question and answer section now. So we have questions, and I'll be taking them shortly. The first person here says, share the recording. Yes, we would share the recording after the meeting. So we have a question. What are the usual reasons for student visa denials, and how can we circumvent them?
Okay, thank you for that question. Now, I think the first one that comes to mind is the reason for study, particularly the school that you are going to. If, for instance, an individual read a particular course, but the course that they've applied for to go and read, maybe for a master's program, for instance, is different from what they studied in the university, then ordinarily that would raise a red flag. And we've also seen, I have experienced in the past, while I was in one of the embassies and they were having a physical interview with a student, I noticed that for secondary school students, they actually ask them real questions about what they are going to study, and if they are not able to answer those questions, then automatically that could lead to a refusal. Then it's also important to note that there are some schools that the embassy would recognize. A lot of embassies would have a list of accredited schools, whether it's a university or the secondary schools, that they would issue visas to their students, to their incoming international students. So you must ensure that that school that you are applying to is accredited with the embassy, or the school is listed with the embassy. So if you submit the visa application and the school is not listed, automatically they would not issue the visa. Then for some schools, they would ask for a payment of the school fees. It's important that the school fees would have been paid as well, and evidence of that is shown. That even shows credibility with regards to the student having the ability to pay for the school already, and that would definitely allow the visa to be issued. I think the fifth one that comes to mind is you must be your sponsor, because if it's a student, a lot of students would have sponsors, maybe they are family members, must be able to show that they have sufficient income to be able to sponsor the trip. So they must be able to show that they are going to be able to sponsor them while they are in that country. What I would usually advise is that a certain sum is deposited with the bank already, or deposited with the school, or if there's some sort of way that you can show that a certain sum has been deposited, whether it's in the student's account, to show that this student will not have recourse to public funds or have recourse to refer to government funds when they get there. So once you are able to show all that, I think the student visa will be issued. Yeah.
Yes, thank you. We have another question here that says, for all visa types, what are the chances of my visa being approved if I reapply?
So as I said, it's a probability thing. When you have someone that has knowledge about those visa applications, it improves the probability of you getting the visa. Now, we can't say that you are 100% that you will get the visa, and the reason is that the consular officer, I always joke that you hope and pray that the consular officer that attends to your application wakes up at the right side of the bed. But the truth actually is that when the consular officer is considering your application, he probably has a lot of other applications he needs to consider. So he doesn't really have the time to actually scrutinize each application. So you must be able to provide all the information he needs per time. So once he sees that you have everything, then the application sails through. But if you don't have proper advice, then that in itself would be an issue. For instance, if there's an error with the birth date, for instance, I noticed that tends to happen a lot. Where somebody is born in 1960 and they put 1906, and it's something like it's a typographical error, but the issue there is that it could affect the person's chances of getting a visa in the future. So being able to now correct those kind of errors is what you have somebody having a third party looking at it and advising on that.
The next question here says, are there resources available to help people who have been refused a visa? You can seek legal advice, like we've earlier said on the call. And before we end the live webinar, would also drop our, inquiry email, and you can always reach out to us if you have, any questions, and we can assist you, providing legal expertise or advice on how to go about your reapplication or your appeal. Our next question here says, what are the consequences of overstaying a visa?
So the consequences of overstaying a visa is that you automatically get a visa ban, because you have breached the reason for the visa, or the timeline that was given to you for the visa. So what we've seen is that when an individual does that and they intend to apply for another visa, then there would be a visa ban from getting another visa.
Although there may be certain reasons why you valid reasons why you may overstay. And I think there are ways you could regularize it. For example, COVID, nobody could move, and a lot of people
Uh,
were
so,
over.
so COVID was a black swan event. The
Yeah.
last before COVID happened, I think it was 19 or 18 something like that happened in the past. So it's a
True.
black swan event. And I agree with you. There are ways that in country you can regularize. For some countries, if you plan to overstay for legitimate reasons, then you can actually apply to the immigration department, and they would grant you an extension.
Yes. Thank you very much. Are there any special considerations for visa applications from certain countries like Nigeria?
I don't really get that question. Are there
Yes,
certain
not very clear.
considerations?
Yes. Are there any special if you can maybe just clarify the question in the question and answer section, then we can address it. So we'll go to the next question now that says, does diplomatic passports cover the family of the diplomat, or are they just for the diplomat alone?
Yeah, so if thank you for that question. If you have a diplomatic passport, particularly if you work with the embassy, and you're traveling with your family, automatically your family would also be issued a diplomatic passport as well. If they're not issued a diplomatic passport, there would be some sort of document. And you must take into account that we are talking about a lot of countries here. So what would apply in each country may be different. But generally for diplomats, if you have a diplomatic passport and you're traveling with your family, for instance, if you work with the embassy, they would issue your family also a diplomatic passport, or they would have a stamp in their Nigerian passport stating that they are diplomats, or they will have a type of visa for diplomats. So automatically, if you're traveling with your family, you would have to be issued with diplomatic status.
Thank you. So we have another question here, quite a very interesting one that says that, for example, if you've been issued a UK or a US visa, is there a timeline to reapply or appeal the decision,
Yeah, so if your visa has been refused, there's no timeline. It depends on the next time you want to travel. But I always advise that it's always important that for every refusal that you have gotten, that you respond to them, even if you are not planning, if it's a time-constrained travel. For instance, if you're going for a conference or you're going for a meeting, that there's a particular time you have to be there, then you may not need to apply for the visa again. But it's important that the next time that you apply for a visa in that country that you are refused, that you respond to that first refusal notice, because it will be on record. Although they say that each application is treated on its merit, you must note that they have your records, and they would say that, oh, they don't think your economic or financial situation has changed. So it will still be the same grounds for refusal. But if you address those issues, then I'm sure the embassy, the consular officer appreciates it when you do that, because it means that you actually need to travel. You have legitimate grounds for travel.
Yeah. Thank you. We have a question that says, are there grounds for appeal where one is issued a shorter stay visa? For instance, the South African consulate in Nigeria have recently been giving just 3 months multiple entry visas, irrespective of what was applied. E.g., if the application was for multiple year, multiple entry, would there be legitimate grounds to appeal in this instance?
Okay, thank you for that question, because I have been I have been a victim of that as well. I think what the individual has to note is that if you have multiple travel that you need to do to South Africa, you need to let the company that is inviting you, or the individual that is inviting you, state it in the letter, the invitation letter, that this individual intends to come to South Africa between this period. And based on that, the embassy would issue a visa for that period. Now, if you say that you are going for a meeting, for instance, and the meeting is maybe for 3 days or 4 days, and you intend to spend maybe another week on holiday, that's for 2 weeks. So ordinarily, they would issue you a visa for that period, you know. So if there is need for extended travel, then you need to it has to be included in the invitation letter that is written. Then by the time you travel the first time and the visa expires, then the time you're applying for the second time, you need to write it or include it in that application that you had applied for one, but there's need for an extended visa. So in a sense, they would issue you. I've seen cases where they issue individuals 1 year. I had gotten at some point a 1 year visa and even a 2 year visa at some point. So it depends on what is in the invitation letter. That's what they will take into consideration to issue the term for the visa.
And then just to add that generally, the whether or not to issue a visa is purely at the discretion of the consular officer, really. And so for most non-immigrant visa applications, you have, at their discretion, they then issue, the visas. The next question here says, can I use the tax returns of my personal business to apply for a visa as my tax return? So can he use a business tax returns as opposed to using his own personal tax returns? I have a small business which is registered and I have a team for that business. Would I be able to use that as my tax clearance if I've never been employed before?
Yes, I would advise that you put it. You also have to include a letter from your business showing that they are the ones sponsoring the business. So when you include that tax returns, it shows that you're actually running a going concern. You have a business that is functioning. So in a sense, it even improves the credibility of your business if you're able to show them that you have your tax returns and you make your tax remittances. Yeah. But it will be the business that is sponsoring. So if you are going on a holiday, for instance, it won't be your business that will be, except maybe you have that arrangement in your business to sponsor your holiday. But ordinarily, it would be your business. If you are going for business, it will be your business that would write a letter to state that, oh, this is our managing director or CEO that's going for this trip, and where the business is sponsoring the trip.
Thank you. Let me also add, since we are now talking about applications with, corporate organizations and businesses, it is very important to know that, you may have registered your business with the Corporate Affairs Commission, but then there's another thing where the business stays registered and active, right? So when you include your business in the application, the embassy in most occasions will always check the CSC website to ensure that your business is active. And if your business shows inactive, if you've not been filing the necessary returns with CSC, that can also be a ground for a refusal. So it's very important while we use our business documentations and business registration documents, we should ensure that we are using documents that are active and we do the right things as a business owner in Nigeria, basically. Our next question here says that, please, I just got married and I want to apply for a visa this September to study. How do I go about it, given that my resumption date is on the 20th of October, I'm guessing, or November? That's a very, very short time.
Yeah, so it can be, we are in November already, so it has to be 20. So you need to confirm what date it is. If you are newly married, it depends on whether you are traveling with your spouse. If you are traveling with your spouse, then for some countries, they issue the visa that would allow your spouse travel with you. For some countries, I think most countries would allow the spouse to travel with you, but your spouse also must be able to provide you must be able to provide sufficient evidence that you are financially capable to sponsor both of you to travel to study. So, and I think you need to confirm which of the 20th. Now, you need to if the period is too short, then I would advise that you apply for your visa first, since you are the primary you are the student, then your spouse can apply for the her spousal or his spousal visa in the future.
Yeah, thank you very much. We have a very interesting question here that says, Mr. Obebe mentioned the need to ensure that the details of the visa is, sorry, 1 minute. To ensure that the details in the subsequent application is the same with the details in the refused application. Now, the question is, what if one can't remember the details he filled out in the first application? And is there a way to access the information in the first application?
Yeah, so that's the reason why I suggested that if it's possible for you to print out the form. No, so if you're telling the truth, there's really no reason for you to print the form. The truth remains the truth. But if there is need to ensure that the information that you put in the first application is the same information that you're putting in the second application, it's important that before you click send, you need to print out, and some online application allow that. If it's a physical document if it's a physical form that you filled, make a photocopy of it and keep that form in your record. So the next time you're applying to that embassy, you are not providing information that is not contained in your first application. So it's important that you have a copy of it. Even if it's not a physical copy, you can have an electronic copy. You can, after you've printed it out like that, you can scan it and keep it in your records. Have a file, a visa file. I have a visa file for my family, for everyone. So anytime I need to get information with regards to any of us, but if you're, as I say, if you're telling the truth, the truth remains the truth. So
yes. I agree. It's very important that we have a record of all our application forms. So our next question here says, I would like to know if they would regard it as an inconsistency if the TB test is for a student, but you're going in as a dependent while your husband is a skilled worker.
Okay, so we are moving into the terrain of immigrant visas, which is it's a huge sea.
Exactly.
I would advise that you do another TB test. And the reason why I say that is that you don't want the first TB test to reflect students and another TB test reflecting something else. So you would have to be at the cost of doing another TB test that would reflect your current status.
Yes. Thank you very much. So our next question here is, please, having a visa granted, but based on the fact that the visa was approved late and the event has lapsed, is it ideal to travel despite the event has expired? Okay.
Also, that's a tricky question in the sense that, and it's good that you raised that question, because I also wanted to mention that it's important to also note that when you have a visa, it does not give you automatic entry to that country. So the visa allows you to travel to that country, but does not give you automatic entry. When you get to the border, you have immigration officers there that they have a right to ask you additional questions. They can ask you what you are coming to do. They can ask you, can you show us evidence of where you will be staying? Can you show us evidence that you will return back to your country? If you are not able to provide them sufficient evidence, in spite of the fact that you have a visa, they can put you on the next flight back to your country, back to Nigeria. So in a sense, it's important that whatever documents that you submitted for your visa, have copies of those documents with you when you are traveling. And if the immigration officer has additional questions at the port of entry, then you can provide those documents to them. Sorry, but I don't think I've answered the question. What was the question again?
No, you actually have answered the question. If you are granted a visa for a specific purpose and probably the visa was granted late and the event has elapsed. So if you're going there for a conference and the conference date, has elapsed and you didn't travel during that period, can you still use the visa after that period?
Yes, you can still use the visa if you can show them evidence that maybe you are going on holiday, for instance. Then at the port of entry, they would ask you additional questions about how much you intend to spend and all that. So you'd have to provide additional information at the port of entry.
So our next question here is it advisable that I apply and get my visa before my dependent applies afterwards for November intake so that there is no delay in the decision making for our visas?
Yes, if you are planning on resumption in November, then you can, it depends on the family status. You can apply as a family, or you can decide to apply on your own. Then the family can join you later. It depends on the circumstances of the family. If you have all the documents in place for the family to apply, I think it's better that you have a family application than an individual application. So if the family has shown that they have sufficient funds, they have where they are going to stay, everything has been paid for, then I think it's better to apply as a family than apply as an individual. But as I said, it depends on the circumstances.
Okay. Thank you for this session. Very insightful. How long does it take for non-immigrant student visa application to be processed?
Well, that's a huge open-ended question because it depends on the country. It depends on, there's so many circumstances that are involved. For some countries, they actually, student visas are treated quite quickly. So for some countries, it may be a month. For those that allow physical interviews, that you go in there to do the interview, your visa is issued in a week or two, depending on the embassy. For those that allow documents only, it may be longer than that. Then it also depends on when you apply. If it's when the date to resumption is quite close, that means that there would have been a surge of applicants at that time. So if you intend to resume probably next year, for instance, and you are applying, you have all your documents and you want to apply this year, I don't think that surge will be there. So it depends on the embassy, as I said. It depends on whether it's a physical interview, and it depends on whether it's a documents-only interview.
Okay. Concerning proof of funds, are there other countries like the UK that accept a 1 month bank statement as proof of funds?
That is that's also an open-ended question. I think the general request that they would have is for 6 months bank statements. That's for evidence that you have sufficient funds. I'm not really sure about how you show proof of funds with the UK, but at least you need to be able to show evidence that the school fees has been paid. You also need to show evidence that you have sufficient funds to be able to settle down when you get there. So I'm not sure about the timeline for the 1 month bank statement.
So what are the documents I need to get, a student visa? I believe most embassies have an official website, and their websites are usually very, very detailed. They have the requirements included in their website. You have the list of documentation. So while you want to apply for a visa, it's very important that you go through their website and ensure that you read up on the visa category, and then you are able to, understand and see the checklist of documents. Each embassy has a checklist of documents that they hand over to every applicant, or you see on their official website. And that basically guides you on the necessary documentations to submit for any visa application or category, basically. So do you want to add anything?
Because of our time, the plan was to end at 2:30.
Yes, so we have so many other questions here.
Okay, so would we maybe have 10 more minutes for the questions, then whatever other questions we miss out, we can, if the person can send an email to us, we'll be happy to answer the question. So
yes.
so we run through now for another 10 minutes, then I think it's important to take into cognizance the time of the people in the attendees as well, so they can go ahead and do other things.
Yes. So how long does it take for a non-immigrant visa application to be processed? I think we've answered this question. like a visa, can an ETA be denied? Hold on, sorry. Can an ETA be denied, and what are the grounds for denying an ETA? And when will the Europe start the ETA system?
I wish I was. I wish I was you said an European immigration lawyer, so I'll be able to. Okay, so I have general knowledge about the ETA. The whole idea is that because of what has happened with Schengen, a lot of countries have started to set up, like if you're traveling from Canada to the US or Canada to Europe now, you must have and I think England too, the UK too is starting the ETA as well. Yes, an ETA can be denied or if they find out that you have a criminal record, like for an individual going to Canada and you've applied for the ETA, if you have a criminal record, then automatically the ETA will be refused, or you may be told to carry out some steps to see how you can the issue with the ETA can be resolved. But mostly, the essence of the ETA is just to be able to track those that are coming into the country. And it's usually for individuals that they did not need an entry visa in the past. So it's just to keep a record of individuals coming from those countries that do not need an entry visa in the past.
Mhm. So, can you explain gift deed for Canada's study visa application, something called gift deed?
Yeah, so a gift deed is what happens is if you have a sponsor, for instance, that wants to give you a certain large sum of amount, which will be placed in your account, and you want to show the consular officer that the funds in the account was not illegally obtained, so to say, or you have these funds have been legally given to me to carry out my education, then the sponsor will prepare what is called a gift deed. That gift deed will state the name of the sponsor and state the name of the individual and state the amount that is given as well. Then I always advise applicants to always ensure that you notarize the gift deed to show that the signatories were the individuals that signed the gift deed. So that will be submitted as part of the documents required for the student visa, the Canadian student visa.
Thank you very much. So because we're pressed for time, I may not take questions that already have been answered in the webinar or during the question and answer section. So our next question here states that if the school fees isn't paid completely, can it affect the visa issuance?
Yeah, so it depends. It depends on what the terms with the school is. For some schools, they would request that the full payment is made. For some schools, they would request that half of the payment is made and the remaining half will be paid. And so whatever the school says is what will determine. So usually when you meet the terms of the school, they will send you a letter which will form part of the documents required for the visa process. So it depends on the school, it depends on the country. So the school will determine that.
Okay. Is pregnancy a reason why a visa should be denied? If a pregnant woman is 6 months, is that a reason for a visa denial?
Yeah, that is a very technical question, because if you are traveling to a country and you are 6 months pregnant, if you intend to give birth in that country and you are applying for, so there's a particular country, we're not going to mention, I'm trying as much as possible not to mention countries now. There's a particular embassy that at some point started to refuse families that had given birth in their country. And as a result of that, what usually happens is if you are 6 months pregnant, you have to usually apply for the medical visa. A lot of individuals applied for the tourist visa, and that in itself is a breach of the immigration regulations. So if you are traveling with, it's not a ground for refusal, However, because they know that a lot of Nigerians like to give birth abroad, so the child can obtain the citizenship of that country, they would sometimes question the reason you are traveling at, because if you are 6 months pregnant, then you're close to delivery. So then also the medical issues that may arise with the health issues that may arrive with, that may occur as a result of the travel as well, will be taken into account. So ordinarily, being 6 months pregnant is not a ground for refusal. However, there are conditions that will be considered before they grant a person that's 6 months pregnant the visa. Yeah, so I think we need to wrap up now. I think since we have just 5 more minutes, if you want to do...
Maybe we can take 2 or 3 more questions.
Okay.
Yes. So if I get a visa and do not travel, can that be a basis for a denial, a potential denial in my next visa application?
No. I get that question a lot. No, because if the reason that you are traveling has passed, for instance, if you are going for a meeting and the meeting has passed, or you are going for a conference and the conference has passed, then you don't need to travel. The next time you apply, then and they ask you, if you go for a physical interview, and this has happened to someone I know, when he went for his physical interview and he submitted his passport, and they asked him that, oh, you got this visa the other day and you did not travel. He said, yes, I did not travel because I had other business arrangements, business meetings that I had to have in other countries. So there was no need for me to travel again, since the time for the meeting that I was going for had passed. And there's really no reason for me to visit your country except I have something to do there. So they issued the visa. So it's not a ground if you do not travel.
Yes, thank you. One more question. Can you sponsor your spouse the same time you're also applying with the spouse?
Yes, you can sponsor your spouse the same time. Yeah. The whole idea is for a lot of countries, they don't want to separate families. So some countries, they call it family reunification. So in a sense, you can sponsor your spouse for education, and also sponsor yourself as well. The whole idea is keeping the family together, and a lot of countries would issue that visa.
Okay, thank you. We have when applying as dependents via a student visa route, is it best for couples to apply separately or apply together?
I think we've answered that question if the person was.
Yes, we actually have answered this question.
Answered that.
We have a number of questions, mostly here on timelines, visa applications timelines. We have earlier stated that most of the timelines are purely at the discretion of the consular officers, and we may not have, there's several reasons why applications will be denied, or the consular officers may require, additional time to, make a decision on your application. So you notice that a lot of applications have like extended timelines. That's really at the discretion of the consular, officer. But we appreciate everyone who has taken their time to join us on the webinar today. I'm sorry if we couldn't take your questions on the live webinar. However, if you have any further questions or additional questions, please, you can send an email or reach out to us to our inquiry email address, immigration@bloomfield-law.com. immigration@bloomfield-law.com. We would answer all your questions. I mean, there's time for answering questions on our email. So send us your questions and we'll be happy to attend to them as they come. And it's also very important that we state that this is a series, so we'll be having more of these webinars in the future. So please watch out. Would inform you, and we'll always update our social media platforms, our LinkedIn page, our Instagram pages. We'll always have these updates, on our pages. So please follow us, and we'll keep you updated when our next webinar series will take place.
So we also need to mention the caveat that all the information we have given to you today is not legal advice. If you
Yes.
need to seek legal advice, you need to see your lawyer to advise you on your immigration lawyer to advise you on whatever process you need to do. So that's just a caveat for us as lawyers, because it's the whole idea for this for the webinar is just to inform individuals on little things that they need to know so they can take action on those things. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for joining our live webinar today. And thank you to our esteemed speaker, Mr. Obebe, for your time on the webinar today. You graciously answered all our questions and we appreciate your time. If you have any other questions or you need to speak to any of us on our team, please reach out to us at immigration@bloomfield-law.com and we'll be happy to assist you for that. Thank you everyone. To enjoy the rest of your day. And please follow us on our social media so that we can keep you updated on the next date on our webinar. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you. Bye.
All right. Bye. Bye, everyone.